Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Southeast Radio.
Welcome back to Southeast Radio's Business Matters with me, Karl Fitzpatrick. Well, over the past few weeks, we have seen many Irish medical professionals return home from abroad to join in the fight against COVID-19. Some of these returnees have my next guest to thank, as he established the Answer Ireland's Call campaign. Neil Sands from Fox Design joins me on the phone now to tell us more. Neil, you are a successful entrepreneur and public speaker, but I'd like to start the interview by discussing the Answer Ireland's Call initiative. Perhaps you could start by telling us about how it all began.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me. The Ireland's Call initiative is really based around two things. The first is the need to get the very best help we can into the fight against COVID-19 here in Ireland. And secondly, been able to accommodate those that we can bring from abroad to this very same fight. So we had a very fortunate event, I suppose, a couple of days ago where I had offered 2 flights to any doctor that was coming from abroad to Ireland. And given that I was self-isolating with my own folks, I was vacating my place in Dublin and offered that whoever needed to stay in my accommodation for up to 12 weeks could do so, and I would pay for the flights. And fortunately, as I mentioned, so many of the small businesses of all sizes, in fact, have come to support the effort. And we've raised a small fund to really bring these folks that are our brightest and best to the front line with those that are already undergoing heroic efforts at the moment. So we're very fortunate that the fund has grown, and we have dozens of doctors that have now put themselves forward.
So in a nutshell, you reached out to the business community through your own network with a view to trying to garner as much support as you possibly could. What level and type of support was offered by business owners across the country?
So I'm not a big partaker of social media broadly, and I tweeted, and there was a ton of people that I didn't know at all that were either following just the news that was happening in Ireland around COVID-19 and were interested in giving some help. And they've come forward. Everyone from, we had a response from a student who was willing to offer his part-time salary for a month. I've tweeted the picture of that on my Twitter account. So from that level, he was willing to donate that, right up to some enterprises that are now getting behind the effort, and hopefully we'll have those on board sooner rather than later, so that we can scale and be able to offer this flight home to as many as possible. So it's really been from every sector. It's not been something that we expected or we had expected that we would need to cater for, but we're very fortunate to have the help of a number of travel agents in Australia, in New Zealand, in the UK, in the US and Canada, all putting in their efforts, in addition to Kevin Sands, Conor Hughes and John Lawler here in Ireland.
And on the news over the past few days, we have seen hundreds of Irish medical professionals returning from all over the world to help in the fight against COVID-19 here. I think as a nation, there's a great sense of pride in that, isn't there?
Massive. And I suppose there's the old adage that when things are at their worst, the Irish are at their best. I recall a couple of years ago, we had the kind of unfortunate incident in Berkeley, California, where we lost so tragically 6 of our young people in an accident. And I had been in California at the time and was the president of the Irish Network Bay Area, which is a group of about 17,000 Irish and Irish professionals, Irish American professionals. And the overwhelming response to that event was just incredible, and I see the very same tenor and tone to the response in Ireland. I think what's very notable is that these folks are very often quite young, and they're in their early 20s and mid-20s. They're young professionals, junior doctors, and on their own volition, and many of them bankrupting themselves. 2 guys I spoke to earlier on this morning, literally every cent they had to get the flight out of Australia to come home. So that level of valor and leadership amongst folks that are so young is rare, and I think it might be our greatest national asset.
Now, your career has spanned banking to startups, classrooms to boardrooms, and has delivered blue sky thinking for blue chips all over the world. But when did you first recognise that you had an entrepreneurial flair?
Both of my parents were entrepreneurs. I think the Irish are very, very entrepreneurial just by nature. I can remember growing up, my dad was in communications, and he had his own small communications company and installed aerials and satellite dishes, and my mum did the equivalent of aerobics now, and was recording songs off the radio and doing classes for up to 200 and 300 people at a time. So I suppose it might have been in my blood a little bit. But I suppose I was also a teacher. I started off my career as a teacher in the North Inner City in Dublin in O'Connell School, and picked up some further education then in Smurfit with an MBA, and eventually kind of went into business in a more significant way. But I think there's an entrepreneur in everybody when times necessitated, and there's definitely times now that will necessitate people being as entrepreneurial and as creative as possible to solve the problems that we have. So I think all entrepreneurship welcome, whatever form it takes.
And talk to me about your time at Salesforce and what you achieved as part of their Ignite team.
Yeah, I suppose one of the founders of Ignite. So Ignite was really responsible for the top level accounts at an enterprise stake. Those folks would be the Mercedes, the Coca-Colas, the Disneys of the world. So kind of these larger brands. And our responsibility there was to build a team of folks that were capable of dreaming what the future could be for Disney or for Coca-Cola or for Mercedes or otherwise. And it was a privileged position to be in. Back to my dad installing aerials and satellite dishes, I recall early in my teens having failed some exam, and he warned me that if I didn't do better in my studies that I'd be in a truck installing aerials and satellite dishes with him. And the very first day on the job at Salesforce was in a place called Greeley, Colorado. It was 14th of February, it was Valentine's Day. It was very, very cold, and I was doing field research for a group called DirecTV. It would be the equivalent of Sky TV over here. And I was in a truck installing aerials and satellite dishes and trying to build new technology for DirecTV. So we were looking for folks that had a bit of experience like that to be able to bring to bear on some of the world's biggest problems. And we started partnerships with government organizations and public organizations in addition to those on the private sector. And so the team was really responsible for envisioning what the future could look like and what the technology was that was required to support that. And that continues today with the Ignite team at Salesforce, which I was very proud of very proud to have worked with.
And what did you learn during your time there?
Oh God, lots and lots. I think the first thing I learned was that you make your own luck as somebody in a large company. I think that there was a lot of folks, and I had hired very many Americans and Irish Americans, and they had a sense that if they went out and gave it a lash and they brought their best idea to the table and brought their best thinking to a customer, that customer might take a chance on them and take a chance on that idea and maybe do something different. And that kind of sense of opportunism was something that we really made our own luck with every day, was when we were coming into conversations with that. The second thing I learned and was very important to me is that if you want to go fast, you can go alone, but if you want to go far, you go together. And so the recruitment aspect of the Ignite team was so integral to its success, and being able to bring entrepreneurs and trend spotters and strategists and technology folks and artists and creatives all together and blend those ideas and collaborate in a way that made new technology possible was really the killer app for us. Then I think the last thing I learned, and this is the only piece of advice I ever give a young professional, is find a really great boss. And I had a boss, a guy called Simon Mulcahy, who of Irish descent but an Englishman, and was just a fantastic advocate for me and for my team, and saw opportunities for us and offered them to us regularly, and sometimes watched us fail, and sometimes kind of invested where other people wouldn't. And that was just a huge benefit to me, was having a great boss. So that was one of the big things I'd learned.
And of course, you've also been at the startup end of the entrepreneurial spectrum. Talk to us about some of these startups and the success which you've enjoyed to date.
Yeah, we've been pretty lucky now. For every successful entrepreneurial story, there's 10 failed ones or 10 failed ideas in the background. So the hedge is, if you're entrepreneurial enough, it'll eventually work out. We kind of two that we were really proud of that we'd worked on recently. My current company, Fox Design, is mostly based around consulting and service consulting with Fortune 500 companies. And so we've been fortunate to be involved in fairly big scale projects with some of the recognizable names in travel, like Booking.com, or in media with Disney. And so as a service organization, it's really all down to your business development arm and how well they can find projects that will pay the rent and keep the lights on, but give you a chance to do something on a big stage. Other two companies that I was involved with on an entrepreneurship kind of stunt was Trove, which was a microinsurance platform which continues to grow today, and FrameHawk, which was a mobility offering for enterprise applications. So again, very much in the technology space, but I've been fortunate to move from that with a couple of projects that I'm working on at the moment. One of those is a whiskey startup, which I have a long fondness for whiskey, and hope to launch with my friend Tim Hurley later on this year, our whiskey in the US and in Ireland. And I also have a partner who's a very serious woman in retail, I suppose you could call her, and with My Sister's Closet, and I help there where I can as well. Some days are filled with the joys and pitfalls of entrepreneurialism.
Now, innovation has been a hallmark of your own career, but can you share some of the projects which you've worked on to date?
Some of the projects that we've been really proud of, innovation-wise on the technology front, are ones like at Disney. So we created a technology within the parks which matched guests with the characters in the movies and animated movies that they loved. So when a 7-year-old would come from Wexford to Anaheim, California, and they would swipe right or left on a screen, and they would match with somebody in a Frozen movie or Cinderella, we could have Cinderella run over to that person at some point in the park and say, "Hey, Fiona, I know you came from Wexford. I know that I'm your favorite character," and take a picture. And these are very small technologies which seem kind of incidental in some ways from an innovation standpoint, but they make a huge difference to the customer experience. And my whole career, I suppose, I've tried to find ways to invent and revise and transform experiences. One of the things that a lot of companies are dealing with at the moment is, how do you hire now in a world that's largely remote? And so we've helped create, with one of the companies that I work with through Fox, we've helped create a platform for peer review and peer interviewing, which is 3 or 4 people interviewing at a time remotely on webcam, and that they can rate each other in real time as they go about their interviews.
And in your opinion, what are the key ingredients for innovating successfully?
Oh, if I had those, I think it'd be very, very, very well off. Look, I think team is number one. So just making sure that you get as passionate a team around you as you can. I think empathy is very, very important. So being empathetic to the customer or the partner or the employee that you're solving a problem for. And then really the capability that you bring to the team has to be very diverse. So like I mentioned in Ignite, we had artists and entrepreneurs sitting right beside finance and operations people. And when you got those two together, the boundaries of their roles started to blur, and you saw the creative guy coming up with something that the finance guy had never thought of, and vice versa. And there's a case there where 2 + 2 = 7 very often, if you can get a team that's diverse and is able to work well together on a collaborative basis.
Now, of course, you're also a public speaker, but typically, what are the key messages that you deliver during these speaking engagements?
The primary, I think, is that we have to focus on ideas that move us onward. So there's a lot of reflection and introspection about how we've done things to date. And what got us here is not going to get us there. And this is very true of our fight against COVID-19 at the moment. So we have to think very, very differently about how we go about solving problems. So, the primary for me is to try and seek out people and ideas that move us forward. And very often that's looking at how things are done today and flipping them on their head, and the orthodoxies and the business as usual practices that a lot of companies and organizations execute every day are actually holding them back. And there's a lot to be said for inviting, like I say, somebody new into the conversation and trying to get a new idea or a bigger idea from them. That's going to be true in crisis, and the necessity of crisis brings lots and lots of people forward that might not otherwise have the opportunity. So as I speak, I talk a lot about the willingness of people to help as long as you'll just go and ask them. And so ideas that move us onward is the first. The second I speak on very often is belonging, and the sense that if we can make people belong to our organizations and make them feel like they belong within our companies and within our businesses and within our communities and society more broadly, that's where the magic happens. When somebody doesn't feel like they belong, they mask, they pretend to be what they see in the organization, so they will never make any real effort to change it or transform it. So creating a sense of belonging is something that my sister, Dr. Anita Sands, and I talk very regularly on, but something I think is just going to be so much bigger in the future than it is today.
And of course, for all businesses, cost-cutting is an essential ingredient in surviving COVID-19. But ultimately, businesses will have to sell their way out of this crisis, won't they?
I think that's going to be part of it. When you look at the likes of Primark right now, so the Pennies, so 160 locations, and none of them are doing any business today. But they are a huge retail asset. They've got stock sitting on the floor, and they've got very able folks in their manufacturing and supply lines. All of that stuff can be repurposed in the COVID-19 new reality. So is there a T-shirt that's sitting within a Primark today that could be given to a frontline staff member or to a patient or to somebody in an ambulance? Or is there a repurposing of their manufacturing and supply line that could start making the surgical masks and the N95 masks that are required for patients and doctors alike? So there's a little bit more to it than simply selling their way out of it. I think cost cutting is definitely a part of many sectors at the moment. It's just a sense as well that, in my view, the government can only hold out so long on the salary levy. And so some of the layoffs that we've seen in the particularly like in the entertainment sector, in the bar sector, and food and bev, those are going to be around for a while. And the second thing I'd say is there's a lot to be said for repurposing our healthcare system, because the way the healthcare system is constructed today to deal with COVID-19 is actually in a pretty good position versus some of our peers in Europe. But there's going to be a huge backlog of all of the things that the healthcare system usually does, and it was understrained prior to COVID-19. And they're going to have to reformat that, and they're going to need a lot of businesses to help them reformat that. And so to deal with the backlog is going to take potentially years into the future. So businesses should be thinking about, A, what they can do to become more remote and more online. If Pennies had been online, I think they could be surviving very well at the moment. And B, what does the future look like if we decide that we're going to help society and the healthcare systems and the structure of government as a business community, and see where you fit in there. So those are kind of two things that we should be thinking about.
And of course, finally, businesses are going through a very tough time at the moment due to the impact of COVID-19. In this time of adversity, what advice can you share with business owners this morning?
So my partner is a business owner, and like I say, is in retail, and so they've had, all of their retail locations have closed, and they've gone, largely online. So where possible, continue to engage with your staff and particularly with your customers through the online channels. There's never been a better time online than now. All of the channels that are most regularly used by your customers and employees are free. So if you've got employees, this is your time to spin up, Zoom and Slack and any of these applications that will allow you to communicate freely and on a regular basis. The second is look at your supply chain and say, is there something that we can pause for now and tell your supplier that we can't purchase this at the moment, but we will purchase it in the future, and be as honest and transparent as you can with all of your suppliers so that they can plan as well. And the communication pattern that's certainly been happening within some of the suppliers in Asia is saying, right, we're going to come back online now and supply the trade and the manufacturing lines that we did before, but it's going to be delayed. And that communication and that transparency is really, really key.
Well, if you've just tuned in, that was Neil Sands from Fox Design, and I would like to commend Neil for helping bring some of our doctors and nurses home in our time of need.
Southeast Radio's Business Matters with Karl Fitzpatrick.
Southeast.